The partisan comedian Bill Maher has been in the process of waking up over the past couple of years, sometimes calling out his peers for their excessive activism and penchant for cancelling and silencing everyone who dares disagree with them. Sometimes, though, he still has some astoundingly bad takes, and we shall look into one of them in this video. You see, Top Gun Maverick is the movie to beat this year, and DC's Black Adam, Marvel's Black Panther, and Disney's Avatar 2 are the only ones that stand a chance at doing it, and it's doubtful if even they can. Because everyone loves Top Gun Maverick, even the critics, and that's what had Bill Maher up in arms. In a nutshell, his issue was that the very same critics who will always shame any woke and virtue-signaling movie for not being woke enough somehow gave the anti-woke Top Gun Maverick a pass. What gives? Well, the good Mister Maher certainly missed the boat on this one, and now he does, in a sense, knowingly or unwittingly, assist in rewriting history and hiding the backlash that did happen. But it just so happens that what Maher didn't see may have some larger implications, as critics have to come to terms with wokeness losing ground. In this editorial, I will begin with some past and current examples of the divide between audiences and critics. What the critics actually said about Top Gun Maverick before changing their tune, how this changed tune is the only thing that Maher saw, and the larger implications of that. As we've covered multiple times here at Midnight's Edge, there has over the past decade been an increasing gap between what professional critics approve of and what audiences actually like and respond to. And never is that gap wider when the feature in question either has ideopolitical messaging or a distinct lack thereof. We saw this with Paul Feig's 2016 Ghostbusters reboot, where the critics were tripping over themselves to praise the female-centric anti-male messaging, while audiences were appalled the movie was a remake and a crap one at that, instead of the sequel they always wanted. When an actual sequel was made years later with Ghostbusters Afterlife, audiences loved it. But despite the diverse and inclusive cast, the critics rallied against it because they saw it as anti-woke and giving in to fan demands. The critics were dead against Sonic the Hedgehog for the same reason. The filmmakers had changed Sonic's design due to fan demand, and the audience loved the finished movie for it, even though the critics never did. The critics loved things like Star Wars The Last Jedi, which subverted the entire Star Wars franchise, while the audience loved Dave Chappelle, whom the critics saw as a genuine black-white supremacist. In short, there is a gap, and it is this. If it is woke, the critics hail it, while audiences reject it. If there is no wokeness, or worse yet, anything that can be perceived as anti-woke, the establishment media complex will declare war on it. But in spite of this, the audience weren't coming over to the critics' side of the fence, and at some point, both the critics and the audience started to notice. Things really came to a head with DC, where the establishment media complex actively warned audiences not to go see the deeply problematic Joker, threatening that some incel might literally shoot audience members if they did. I'm not even joking here. Go back to our older Joker coverage and see for yourself. The audience responded to these implied threats by making the comparably low-budget R-rated feature a billion-dollar hit, which even outgrossed Star Wars: The Rise of Palpatine. Then, a few months later, audiences shunned the anti-male, ultra-woke critical darling Birds of Prey. Now, I'm not going to say that critics have gotten more in sync with the audience since then, because Lord knows that's not the case. But the critics may have gotten a bit more aware of how far apart they stand from the audience upon whose readership their job ultimately depends. And that may have made them a bit more measured, which we saw with Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick opened on May 27th, but long before then, test screening results were through the roof, and even critic screenings left no doubt that this was going to be a major hit with the audience. But Hollywood was uneasy, because they deemed the movie to be deeply problematic. In their very lengthy review from May 12th, The Hollywood Reporter began by referencing and subtly critiquing the Reagan-era patriotism of the original, stating, "All that has only continued to toxify in the post-Trump age, with patriotism curdling into white supremacy. So depending on where you sit on the political spectrum, your enjoyment of Top Gun Maverick might depend on how much you're willing to shut out the real world and surrender to movie star magic." From there followed a long-winded recap of the story, which you have to read very, very carefully to even figure out that this is a positive review, because that was something it must have been very difficult for the Hollywood Reporter to award the movie. Even in the LA Times review, which was positive, it was stated that it was best not to think too hard about the fetishizing of the military and, by implication, other problematic aspects of the movie. Just switch your brain off and enjoy the movie star ride. On May 25th, just as the movie was about to open in wide release, the Hollywood Reporter wrote a piece in which they essentially apologized to the industry on behalf of the industry for the movie getting good reviews. The article, titled "Tom Cruise, Top Gun Maverick and the Uneasy Echoes of Hollywood Past," read, "Top Gun Maverick sits at a sky-high 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. After seemingly endless pandemic miseries, it feels like there are whole audience quadrants hungry for an old-school PG-13 popcorn movie. A throwback for parents who can revel in nostalgia while their kids enjoy the action. But Top Gun also cooks up a pretty complicated stew of feelings for some. Feelings about politics, about the fate of the business. While most critics obviously liked the movie, the politics of the film created a sense of unease for more than one. After expressing sympathies with the industry, the writer then observed, the audience at the premiere I attended just seemed ready to surrender to the star power of Tom Cruise. The article then, in a very long-winded way, essentially concluded that the audience really dig this, despite all the problematic aspects, so what can you do? Top Gun Maverick went on to become the top-earning movie of the year so far, and a hit with both audiences and critics alike. But the critics, and the entertainment media complex at large, were none too pleased about it. Top Gun Maverick is a smash hit that is based on Reagan-era patriotism. It has a white male lead who is courting a woman, both of which are considered problematic by modern-day Hollywood. And worse yet, it has diversity without that being pointed out and virtue signaled over. All of this is very scary in some quarters of Hollywood, as what they consider the wrong people may try to score points from it, which is exactly what happened. Conservatives started seeing the movie as a victory. The alarm bell was rung by Vanity Fair, whose May 31st piece, titled "Top Gun Maverick is the right's latest culture war crusade," reads, "With the Memorial Day weekend release of Top Gun Maverick, conservative pundits have taken the culture war to the skies, hailing the blockbuster as a patriotic, anti-woke display of militarism and masculinity. They have also cited its record-breaking box office performance as proof that the public is on their side." From there, the publication then proceeded to quote prominent conservatives who took a liking to the movie and allegedly proclaimed it to be conservative, which was Vanity Fair's way of sending the tacit message to their peers in the entertainment media complex. We got to shift the narrative on this one. Shortly afterwards, a ton of articles tried to do just that. You'll recall the Hollywood Reporter already tried attributing the movie's success entirely to the star power of Tom Cruise. Well, that's what Salon did too. Their June 3rd article, which you'll note is just days after Vanity Fair's call to arms, was titled, "No, Top Gun isn't an anti-woke success story, but rather a tribute to aging Tom Cruise and balls." And it had the byline, "Why are conservatives so desperate to claim this as their movie? It's basically a 2-hour, 11-minute Cialis ad." I could have quoted more from the article itself, but in this case, what's the point? The title kind of says it all. A few days after that, on June 8th, the Washington Post published a piece titled "Top Gun Maverick scores rare apolitical hit without woke politics." The implication here is that all hit movies are woke movies, so wokeness is good. Just forget about Pixar's Lightyear and Marvel's Thor Love and Thunder flopping, that never happened. Top Gun Maverick did happen, but that was just a rare fluke, and there are no lessons to be learned here. Move along, nothing to see. And this has, in not so many words, been the narrative of the entertainment media complex ever since. But it took a major reframing to get to that point. Someone who seemingly completely missed out on that is Bill Maher.
And finally, new rule. Someone has to tell me why the same film critics who find every movie somehow lacking in woke credentials are all in on Top Gun Maverick, a 2-hour propaganda ad for defense contractors, militaristic jingoism, and bombing foreigners. Every other movie that comes out, all of which are made by liberals for liberals with ardent liberal intent, fall short. No amount of virtue signaling is ever virtuous enough. But somehow, 96% of film critics love Top Gun. If you're a film critic and you've been making your life's mission to root out the insufficiently liberal in cinema, did you not notice that Top Gun is a lot about making warmongering sexy again? The weapons porn, the endless money shots of engines burning jet fuel, the big dick energy, the aircraft carriers dancing in the sumptuous, oily haze, all to the manly, macho, masculine sounds of Kenny Loggins?
In short, Bill Maher was flabbergasted that the woke media gave something as decidedly unwoke as Top Gun Maverick a pass. There are two obvious takeaways from that. The first is that he is still fairly woke, or rather more accurately, still partially asleep, because he missed out on a whole cultured war being fought out over Top Gun Maverick, one where the best that could be done was to reframe it into something apolitical rather than politically conservative. The second is that either wittingly or unwittingly, Maher is actually furthering this reframing with his ignorance. The far bigger takeaway, though, is that for the woke side of Hollywood, Top Gun Maverick is no win. All the reframing can do is mitigate the loss. Because the audience voted with their wallets, and that did not escape Hollywood's and the surrounding media complex attention. We recently put out a video on the initial batch of reviews from professional critics for Amazon's The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power. For a production of this scale and magnitude, positive reviews are par for the course. There is a whole ecosystem in place to make sure of that. But in this case, many more than you would expect broke rank and called it out for the trite that it is. While the majority of reviews were positive, even the positive ones were more measured than you would expect, leaving hedges in their positive reviews. Case in point, Variety. While their review at first glance appears overwhelmingly positive, and it counts as a positive review on Rotten Tomatoes, it contained the hedge. With a whopping 50 episodes reportedly planned, it's hard at this point to say how successful the Rings of Power will ultimately be as a whole. There's plenty of time for some plots to overstay their welcome as their paths intersect with more intriguing ones, or for the series' overall narrative to get tangled in the weeds of Tolkien's dense Lord of the Rings appendices. That right there is a publication future-proofing their review, knowing full well that the audience will hate this. And now, they can refer back to that initial review and claim that they always knew it was going to fail, in the hopes of retaining some credibility when it inevitably does. Hollywood has gotten some very expensive messages as of late, and they came from the audience, who voted with their wallets. The audience is increasingly no longer buying the wokeness Hollywood is selling. Woke movies are flopping left and right, while Top Gun Maverick is the biggest hit of the year. Try as they might, that is something neither Hollywood nor the entertainment media complex can ignore forever. They know they're losing ground. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.